Hello friends, David Brody here. On this video, I have 71 suggestions for leadership. Kind of just a random assortment of suggestions for you. Now, of course, I can't say that I'm doing all these suggestions. I'm going to give you 100% myself. If I was, I'd probably be the leader of YWAM International. But I'm still learning, as you are, and as we all apply these things, we can all rise up in leadership. I have found the more I do these things that I'm going to talk to you about, the better I do with my life and my leadership. Suggestions for good leadership. And number one is be a person of action. When we look around for people we think we would make good leaders, we look for people who are active, who are ready to take initiative and do things and get things going. So be a person of action. I heard about one pastor who gave a sermon, and his sermon was, do something. That's all he said. He would say, do something. Do something. Do something. Do something. And that's sometimes what we need to tell ourselves to get ourselves going. And when we're active, we can be better leaders. Proverbs 14:23 says, in all labor there is profit, but in mere talk leads only to poverty. A good leader can deliver the goods. So a person who can deliver the goods will rise in leadership. When I've looked around to see who I think would be a good potential leader, I see who really gets things done, who says, I'm going to do this, and they really do it. They really get things done. So you could have two people at a YWAM base, for example, and one has been around longer than the other, but the other ends up being placed in leadership quicker. That's often because that other person is delivering the goods. They're really getting things done. All right, number two, a similar thing. Be a person who initiates. Don't wait to be told what to do. Now, here are some levels of dependability and leadership, and you can see where you fall. A, there are those who are not reliable to do what they're asked to do. You're asked to do some errand, some task, and you don't do it. And if you're not reliable to do what you're asked to do, you're really at the lowest level in a sense. B, there are those who will do what they're asked to do. So that's good if you're reliable. C, there are those who will see the needs and initiate new projects on their own. That's the level that we want to be on. So don't just wait around to be told what to do, but keep your eyes open for new projects that you can take on. And when you do that, that shows that there is leadership potential. Number three, be ready to come up with new ideas and take action on them. There are some people who can come up with lots of ideas but never take action. In fact, I've talked to a number of people who did the LTS, the Leadership Training School in YWAM. It used to be very popular in the 90s and 2000s. They still have them, but a lot of people I knew took that school. And in that school, you have a project. You come up with a project for your ministry. So you kind of make out the plan and figure out how you're going to do it, and that's part of your school is coming up with this project and planning it. And so I've asked a number of people in the who did the LTS, how did your project turn out? And most of them said, well, I never did it. I would say probably at least 3/4 of the people I asked never did their project. So I would say, come up with a project that you're really going to do. Peter Drucker once said, effective leadership is not about making speeches or being liked. Leadership is defined by results, not attributes. Number 4, be secure in your leadership. Proverbs 29:25 says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." So don't be, for example, a people pleaser like Aaron. See, insecure people really want to please others. And this is what Aaron did. This is when Moses went up Mount Sinai. He had been gone for a while. When the people saw that Moses was long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, let us make gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me." So the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they had handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you out of Egypt." So here we see Aaron being insecure and giving in to wrong things. I certainly realized it was not good to do this. When I led my first YWAM outreach team, we went to Mindoro, an island in the Philippines, and we went to a certain village, and we had received permission to do an open air in the square, complete with a sound system and things. And when I told the team, there was one person in the team who opposed it. This guy, Richard, who said, "I do not think we should do a drama, an outreach in the square. We're going to look ridiculous. It's going to be stupid. It's not going to work." And he was very adamantly against it. And so later on, in my discouragement, I decided, okay, I guess we just won't do a drama in the square, even though I knew it was the right thing to do. But I gave in to this guy, Richard. And so we didn't do the drama. When we later told the team, okay, we're not going to do the drama, you know what happened? This guy, Richard, said, "We should have done that drama. I knew it was the right thing to do, but you decided on your own not to do it," and totally attacked me. And I realized this is what people-pleasing gets you. The very person even you're trying to please turns around and can stab you in the back. So don't make decisions just to please people, but rather listen to God, do the right thing. Now, it's good to listen to people, listen to their suggestions, but don't give in to the wrong things. But insecure people can also be where they don't like their decisions being questioned, and there's just this complete shield that's up. Being insecure like King Saul. Don't be an insecure dictator like King Saul, who felt threatened by David and so on, and even was killing different people, trying to stay in power. I remember an outreach I was on in my DTS in New Zealand, and we had been in one town where there wasn't a whole lot to do. We had some different outreach activities, but the schedule was pretty light, and so the team leaders kept having us do drama practice, again and again, rehearsing the same dramas. And so a couple of us students in the team thought, why shouldn't we maybe just have some extra time just to go into the city by ourselves and just make friends and maybe do a little friendship evangelism or something like that, rather than do drama practice again and again. So we mentioned it to one of the staff, and the staff person mentioned it to the leaders. And the next team meeting we had, the leaders said, "Well, it's been mentioned to us that some of you don't like doing drama practice. So we'll give you a choice. You can do drama practice or you can do work duty." And so we said, okay, we'll do drama practice. But see, there was no openness there. And that can come out of insecurity. Okay, number 5, a fifth suggestion for leadership is empower others. Be releasing. So Give people things to do and just let them go. And you'll find that people will do very well when you empower them. Don't micromanage. Micromanaging is when you tell people what to do, but then you tell them exactly how to do it, and you're always looking over their shoulder and, controlling every detail. And that gives people no freedom. We don't want to be micromanagers. It is said that U.S. President Jimmy Carter was somewhat of a micromanager who felt like he had to be controlling so many different things. And he really wiped himself out during his presidency. I mean, you could see how tired and old he had become in just 4 years. He was so controlling that if he was in Air Force One, the plane for the president, and someone was in the White House and they wanted to use the tennis court, they had to phone Air Force One and get permission from him to use the tennis courts. So he didn't do so well in a number of things. But after him came Ronald Reagan. And Reagan had a philosophy that there is no limit to the amount of good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. In other words, he would just delegate tasks out to others, let them do them in the way they wanted to do them, and those people would get the credit, and things would go well. And his administration went quite well with this sort of thing, that he really delegated things out and didn't control. This is Pastor David Yonggi Cho, the senior pastor and founder of the YWAM Full Gospel Church, the Assemblies of God. This is the largest church in Korea with about 1 million people in it. But the story is interesting of how this church grew, because the church was a big church and it was growing, but he had all these programs that he was micromanaging. He was controlling everything. And he felt like God wanted there to be small groups in his church, and he was, trying to begin to run it all, but he wiped himself out. And he got sick. And he was just wiped out in bed, completely sick, unable to do anything. So he realized he couldn't do this. And so he just delegated out the running of these small groups in his church, mainly to the women that were in his church. And the small groups went very well. The women really just ran with it and ran them very well. And the church grew to be 1 million people. But it was because he learned to not be controlling of everything himself. Years ago, we had a conference for YWAM in South India. And we had about 400 people there. And I was put in charge of the games. And so I was trying to organize and figure out all the different games and how I would run them. But then I had a problem with my foot and I couldn't really get around very well. And I really realized I can't do this. I don't have the physical ability to run around and run all these games. We need a lot of people to do this. So I formed a whole team of people and delegated out the running of most of the games. I ran just one game, the one you see there. And as a result, it went much better than I expected, much better than I anticipated, because I didn't run it all. I let other people run most of it. And so the more we're able to delegate out to qualified people, the better things are going to go. So don't be controlling. Number 6, as a leader, be courageous. And Joshua 1:9 says, "Be strong and courageous, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Eddie Rickenbacker said, "Courage is doing what you're afraid to do. There can be no courage unless you're scared." So hopefully we can all be stepping out in areas where we're not fully experienced, where it's something new, something we need to trust God for, and that stretches us, and it also stretches our faith in God to see these things happen. Number 7, be ready to receive criticism. I can guarantee if you're in leadership at any level, you will receive criticism. I remember one time, this girl and I were co-leading an outreach team, and we announced, okay, tomorrow morning we will have breakfast at 8 o'clock. And one person said, why so late? And another person said, why so early? And I just had to laugh because you just can't please everyone. Be ready for criticism. I've seen quite a few DTS staff come back for their outreach riddled with bullets from their own team who criticized them. So it's going to happen, and you need to be ready for it. You need to realize that criticism comes with the territory when you are in leadership. Number 8, choose to be optimistic. I guarantee there will be times when things are not going so well and you really are discouraged, but you need to be optimistic because the attitude of the leader will soak down into the team. I've hosted a number of outreach teams, and I've noticed that when there's an enthusiastic leader, the team is enthusiastic. If there's a leader who's kind of a damp rag, who's kind of, unmotivated, the team becomes like that. So you need to choose to be optimistic, and that's going to help your team. One guy I've known for many years, Dave Moore, he was my scoutmaster in Boy Scouts back in the 1970s, early 80s. And he's actually still a scoutmaster today. But one thing Dave Moore did was he was always optimistic, and he could laugh when things went wrong. And when you go on campouts, things always go wrong. It rains, the trailer breaks down, the bus gets a flat tire, supplies are forgotten, or things go wrong. And he always could laugh when things went wrong. And we all learned to laugh with him when things went wrong. So we wouldn't complain. We would just go along with his good attitude. And that's going to happen when you're leading. If you have a good attitude when things go wrong, that will soak down to the others. And what you need to do is encourage yourself and lift yourself up at times. Don't just let your negative feelings go. David is a good example of this. One time, David and his men were based in Ziklag. That's where their wives and all their things were. They would go out and do these raids. And one time they came back and they found that Ziklag had been raided. And their wives have been taken away and their things have been taken away. And here we see in 1 Samuel 36, and David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So there are times when you will just need to strengthen yourself in God, have a good attitude. And of course, we know that when David did this, they were able to solve the problem and recapture their wives and supplies from the enemy. Number 9, learn from your mistakes. John Maxwell once said, "Some days you win and some days you learn." So the good thing is, even if you make a mistake, at least you're going to learn. It said a wise Native American chief was asked, "How can I be a good leader?" And he said, "By making good decisions." And so the person asked, "Well, how do I learn to make good decisions?" And he said, "By making bad decisions." So at least we can learn as we're doing this. Number 10, lead with your strengths and delegate your weaknesses. Moses, for example. Now, Moses was not a natural leader. He was not naturally confident. When God told him to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt, he said, "Oh, Lord, send someone else." And then he said he couldn't speak very well. But Moses led very well because he had other gifts like faith and miracles. So he led with his strengths. One time I was at a YWAM training base in Kathmandu, Nepal, and we were doing spiritual gifts testing with the staff. And the leader there, a nice girl named Sue, she took the test, and you know what? She scored 0 on leadership, and yet she was the leader of this base. But it also turned out she scored very highly on things like intercession and faith. And what she was doing is she was leading that base through intercession and faith, leading them to listen to God and to really trust God and so forth. And so she was doing quite well, delegating her weaknesses and using her strengths. Number 11, lead with influence and not so much by position. In other words, people should be following you not just because you have a leadership title, but because of who you are, that they see your knowledge and your character and your charisma, and they want to follow you for who you are. Margaret Thatcher, who was former UK Prime Minister, said, "Being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't." It's kind of like a woman saying, "Hey, I'm a lady." She's probably not much of a lady if she has to say that. So if you are saying, "Hey, I'm the team leader, you need to follow me," if you find yourself saying that a lot, probably you aren't doing a great job leading, because people aren't just naturally wanting to follow you. Okay, number 12 is love those who you lead. One person who demonstrated this to me was Frank Naya. Frank Naya was my base director when I did my DTS in New Zealand, and he taught and really demonstrated on the Father heart of God. And he liked to just show people the Father heart of God, so he'd be, in a sense, listening to God to see how he could show this to different people. And one time he was in a department store and saw a big display of men's white socks. And for some reason, I came to mind. So he bought me a package of 6 men's socks. But what he didn't know was the shoes I was wearing, kind of like hiking boots, had some leather in the bottom of the heel that had stuck up and had worn holes in most all my socks. So he definitely was hearing God well, demonstrating God's love to people. 1 Corinthians 13:2 says, "If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I have nothing." So in other words, we can run an efficient ministry, we can organize our outreach team well, we can do all the administrative things perfectly, but if we're doing all that without love, really you're ending up with nothing. We need to have everything in love. In fact, 1 Peter 4:8 says, "Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins." And you know what? If you're in leadership and you love the people you're leading, you're going to cover over a multitude of your leadership sins. You may make various mistakes in leadership, but if you're loving people, generally, those are going to be covered over a lot. So make that a real part of your leadership. Love is so important. The Beatles had it right. All you need is love. Number 13 is resolve differences with humility. So if you get in a conflict as a leader, don't just go on the assumption of, well, I'm the leader, I'm more mature, I know what's happening. This person is obviously rebellious and difficult. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe there just is a different perspective to the whole thing. And so don't enter conflicts assuming that you are right and the other person needs to change their act. Number 14, be good at communication. This is an important part of leadership. You really want to learn to do all the different modes of communication well. You should be good at speaking. You should be good at emailing, sending out written communication. You should be good even at photography and these different sort of ways of communicating, because you want to be able to communicate in different ways to get the message out. Number 15, encourage those who are under your leadership. This is very important. Even in secular companies, some people end up leaving their jobs not because their pay isn't good, but because they're not affirmed by their bosses, by those in leadership. And in YWAM, we're not paying anything. So all the more need to encourage people. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, "Therefore encourage one another and build each other up just as you are doing." And you know, when you're encouraging people, you're building a greater atmosphere. Also, when you're a leader and you're encouraging someone, that encouragement is all the more valuable because of you being a leader. That has much more impact. Like I remember one time I was at La Novla. We had a University of the Nations conference there. And we had one time where we were all sharing about different courses and schools we were running. And the person running that sharing time was Dean Sherman, who at that time was the Dean of the College of Christian Ministries. They used to call him Dean. And so I got to share at one point about a course that we were running called the Practical Missions course, in which we mixed outreach and lecture, alternating weeks and so on, kind of a mixture of both. And later, when I passed him by, he said, "Oh, I really like that course that you're running." So I was very encouraged as this came from Dean Sherman. Or another time in YWAM Honolulu, I ended up speaking at the big base meeting they had once a week. And John Dawson, who is the global convener of YWAM, his son was in one of the schools, so he was there. And so after I taught, I was walking out of the building in the back, and he was coming in, and he said, "Oh, that was a great message." So I was encouraged by that the head of YWAM enjoyed my message. Number 16, always be learning. So when you're in leadership, you should always be growing and learning and going forward. Proverbs 10:14 says, "The wise store up knowledge, but the mouth of the fool invites ruin." So we should always be storing up knowledge, learning in different ways. Proverbs 25:2 says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out a matter is the glory of kings." So part of leadership is researching and searching things out and learning and growing. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is to read. There's that saying, readers make good leaders. This is my collection of books here in Chile. Books are pretty expensive here, but I have a few I've been able to bring in. And I found that whenever I see a good leader, if I'm able to go to their place, inevitably they'll have a good collection of books, because readers make good leaders. And another way we can learn is by listening to Christian podcasts, Christian videos on YouTube. I mean, wouldn't you just like to sit down with someone like Ravi Zacharias and find out about philosophy and so on, or spend time with Joel Steen or with John MacArthur or Lauren Cunningham? Well, you can through these videos and podcasts and books. Their wisdom is available to you all the time. Number 17, find and harness the abilities of others. See, one approach is just to take your team and say, you do this, you do that, you do this, but that kind of wears everybody out. What you want to look at first is, what is each person gifted in? What are they interested in? What do they enjoy doing? And try to slot them into ministries and tasks that they're going to be good at and they're going to grow in. Number 18, learn to listen. And this can be helpful, especially if you're new in leadership and you just are still trying to figure things out. If you just sit with people and listen to what they have to say and hear their heart, you're going to do well, because you'll be really connecting well with each person. I mean, there's a story about Abraham Lincoln, who was president of the USA during the American Civil War. And one time a friend came to visit him, and Abraham Lincoln kind of just walked around talking about the problems of the war, and, oh, this is happening and that's happening, and, oh, I don't know what to do about this. And the friend just listened. And Abraham Lincoln talked for quite a long time about all the different problems. And finally, at the end, Abraham Lincoln said, "Oh, thank you so much. I feel better." And all this guy did was listen. A lot of people are really going to be helped by you if you'll just listen to them. And then you're learning at the same time. So it's a double bonus. Number 19, find good role models. Just look for good people to emulate and to follow their way, like Lauren and Darlene or various good leaders we have around us. Number 20, make life enjoyable under your leadership. So people are going to follow you if things are enjoyable also. You don't just want to be work, but we're human beings. We need to have fun. We need to let go. So have some fun times as well. Make that a part of things. Number 21, keep trying new things. Don't get into a rut. Sometimes we have a ministry where you're just doing this on Monday and this on Tuesday and this on Thursday, and you begin to get into a pattern of things, but don't just stay in the same old pattern. You got to be bringing in the new and evaluating the old things you've been doing to see if you should continue to do them or not. And trying new ideas. I notice that good dynamic leaders are always trying out new things. Not all those things end up working out great. Not all of them succeed. But the more things you keep trying, the more you're going to get some that work out really well and are key things that can help you in the future. 22, prioritize your time. Now, here we see a graph of the different ways we can use our time. One would be things that are urgent and important. Another would be things that are urgent but not important. Another would be important but not urgent. Or we have neither important nor urgent. Okay? So an example of something that's urgent and important is someone who has just cut their wrist and they're bleeding terribly, and you have to, that's obviously urgent and important. That's addressed immediately. Those things tend to be quite obvious. Something that is urgent but not important. That can be someone interrupting you saying, "Hey, I need your help with this project I'm working on, and I don't know what to do." And they sound all like this is an emergency, but it's not really. But they're just feeling urgent, and so you don't want their emergency to interrupt you if it's not that important. Then we have things that are important but not urgent. Now, what would that be? It's something that you need to be practicing, but it doesn't have to be done right now. That's things like prayer, studying the Word, getting into the Bible, these sort of things. They're not urgent, but they are important. And then we have things that are neither important nor urgent, flipping around on Instagram and Facebook and chit-chatting and all these things that are just kind of nothing, right? And what we tend to do is we easily drift into the neither important nor urgent. It's very easy to be distracted by some YouTube video or something like that. And the thing we neglect is the important but not urgent, being in God's Word and spending time in prayer. So we want to spend less time in these useless things and more in the important things. Ravi Zacharias, there was a video I saw of him recently where he was relating that one reason he had gotten so good at apologetics and philosophy and getting close to God was that he was careful not to be distracted into things that were not important. So we all need to work on prioritizing our time. And that leads us to 23. Keep a to-do list. This can help us prioritize our time a bit, because if you have a list of things that you need to be doing, that's always available. Sometimes you just kind of feel like, oh, I don't have anything to do, and, I'm just kind of free. But then if you have a to-do list and you look at it and you realize, oh, that's right, I need to do that. I need to do this other thing. It reminds you of the things you need to do. Sometimes I'll keep a to-do list, and then I'll put a special mark by things that are more important, more urgent or more important, to get to those things first. So that list can be there, and there's endless things that can be done. And so I don't just feel like I have nothing to do. We all have things to do, but sometimes we forget what those things are. And so the list helps you. Number 24, be flexible. Be ready to go to plan B. So when you're leading an outreach team, things can happen. There could be cancellations. There could be people who don't show up. There's something that's not available, and you have to have a plan B. So sometimes you need to be thinking about a plan B. Kind of like, okay, if this doesn't happen, what will I do instead? And then you're not bent out of shape when things go wrong, as they often do. Number 25, don't wear a mask. Be real. Matthew 6:1 says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward in your Father in heaven. In other words, don't act all holy in front of people and then be sinning secretly, right? We want to be real people. The people who wear masks are those who have secret, unconfessed sin, and they end up kind of acting on the outside. And we've all done this at times. So we want to avoid that practice and just have a clean heart on the inside. Number 26, foresee potential problems. So whenever you're running some project or going on some outreach, think of what could go wrong, and then have a possible solution. And then again, you're not caught by surprise. 27, plan and prepare things ahead of time. So for example, if you're going to be leading a meeting, don't just show up at the meeting and say, so what do we need to talk about? Let's see here. No, you as the person leading the meeting, you need to plan ahead of time. Okay, let's have someone pray, and then let's talk about this point, this point, this point, this point, and it'll go much better. 28, keep giving out ideas, suggestions, and visions. Because the more you do that, the more you'll inspire people, the more good things that will happen. I have heard that Lauren Cunningham is like this. He's always giving out ideas, suggestions, visions. I got to spend a half a day with him one time, and I asked him, what's the latest thing? And he said, El Salvador. We don't have YWAM in El Salvador. And probably the next day he was saying something else. I've heard he's always voicing out things. And we can be, in a sense, little Lauren Cunningham's doing the same thing, speaking out visions and ideas. Number 29. Substance is more important than style. What that means is what is practical and works well is more important than what looks nice and is impressive. So as you're setting up new projects, ministries, outreach, don't focus on what looks amazing, but what really works. For example, one time there was a ministry that they started in Madras. It was like a computer school. And what they did when they looked for a building to have this computer school is they found a nice building right on the ocean. Unfortunately, they didn't have electricity hooked up to this building, so they had to have their own generator, which was quite expensive. But they purchased brand new computers, and they painted the place really nice. And they even had I remember they had some artwork and sculptures, and it really looked great. And they kept saying, "We are doing things with excellence," and it all looked wonderful. But it was overspending, and the thing went broke. So they were focusing too much on style, not enough on substance. Number 30, as an officer, identify with your soldiers. This is a picture of George Washington at Valley Forge. This is during the American Revolution. And they were in the wintertime. The troops were out in the wilderness in the snow. George Washington, as the top general, could have stayed in a house or something, but he chose to sleep and stay with the troops out in the cold. But they had great respect for him because he did these sort of things. So you don't want to be the sort of leader that just kind of says, okay, you guys go out and do outreach, but we want leaders who are involved, who are with everyone as they're doing. 31, be open for complaints and grievances. And again, this can tie in with whether someone's a secure or insecure leader. But if you're secure, you'll be open for people to complain and talk about things that are not going correctly. And then you can correct these things. So don't become all defensive when people complain. Proverbs 15:31-32 says, if you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. If you reject criticism, you will only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding. After I led my first outreach team, one of the students wrote a 3-page criticism of me and my leadership. And I read this, and some of the things may have not been so true, maybe just her anger, but a number of things I found to be true, actually. And I learned from this list of criticisms, so I didn't just throw it out automatically. In fact, from that, I eventually developed a list of suggestions for outreach team leaders. Number 32, be willing to sacrifice. When you're in leadership, you'll have to make more sacrifices. There'll be sacrifices of time, where you need to take out time to deal with problems or start up new things we need to work on. Leaders seem to often need to be willing to be hospitable, whether it be taking someone out for coffee because you need to talk with them, or hosting someone in your home, that sort of thing. So be ready to sacrifice. But God will supply. So as you give out, you'll find that God will multiply it back to you. Number 33, have integrity in the small things. And I have found that if you see a person who is having integrity in the small things, they are most surely having integrity in the big things. I remember there was a guy in our ministry who was like the administrative person who dealt with some petty cash, and we discovered he was taking just a little bit of petty cash to get some chai every now and then for himself. He wasn't having integrity in the small things. That was addressed, but later it was found he didn't have integrity in some big things. At the same time, I've seen people be very careful to have integrity in small things, and as they grow in leadership, I find that that good character retains itself. So if you have a habit and are very careful to have integrity in the small things, that will help you so that when you get into bigger things, you'll be trustworthy. Luke 16:10 says, "If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities." So true. 34. Avoid things that waste your time. And we've already talked about this, but it's always good to remind ourselves to avoid those things. In India, I find the biggest time wasters tend to be, one, invitations, to events. Indians love meetings, and sometimes a lot of these meetings are just social events. They're not that necessary. They're not really important. And some people end up going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. So be careful of what meetings you're going to and whether they're the ones that are constructive for you or whether it's just kind of you don't really need to be there, you're not really adding anything, or just sitting around drinking chai for excessive amounts of time and chatting about nothing, or again, just cruising through your phone on Instagram and this and that, and just randomly. There are constructive things we can do on social media, but also it can be a time waster as well, so we need to be careful on that. So for yourself, just think about what things do you do that are really kind of a waste of time. We all have different things we do that fits in that category. So think about your thing and think about how do you reduce that. Number 35, spend time with God for fresh revelation and power. And sometimes when we're in ministry, we just get into these cycles of work and ministry and projects, and we forget to spend time with God. And if you don't, you can slowly wear yourself out. Joyce Meyer once said, "Spending time with God is the key to our strength and success in all areas of life. Be sure that you never try to work God into your schedule, but always work your schedule around Him." So again, that's one of the things that would be important, but not urgent. Number 36, especially true when you're doing outreach, record statistics and examples. And these can be very good for when you're sending out newsletters and things like that. So have someone in charge of taking numbers of people who have heard the gospel and who've been prayed for and so on. And if you have some good stories that happen, write those down. Those can be very useful. Number 37, make sure accounting is done properly. Now, the way I do that is I just make sure I don't do the accounting because I'm not very good at that, but my wife is, and other people can be around as well. So, because accounting needs to be done properly, and especially in this time of governments are becoming more controlling and regulatory, and so we have to submit more reports, and so we really need to make sure our accounting is done accurately and well. Number 38, take action if something goes wrong. If you take good action when something goes wrong, you can minimize the damage. For example, there was one time a few years back, an Italian ship called the Costa Concordia. It was a cruise ship. and the captain was a guy named Francesco Schettino. And so what happened is this ship was going past an island in Italy where one of the crew leaders had lived, and so they were going to light their lights and blow their horn as they went by that village. But then this ship got too close and hit a rock under the water, and it caused a leak in the ship, and the ship was slowly leaking, and the captain turned the ship around and got it closer to shore before it sank. But in the midst of this, the other crew members saying, well, should we call for an abandoned ship? And he kept stalling, maybe thinking the problem's not so bad and let's not do that just yet. And because he kept stalling, they weren't able to have a very good abandonment of the ship with the lifeboats. And 32 people died in that ship because he so poorly dealt with the situation. In fact, once the ship tilted on its side and he was close to shore, the captain, rather than staying with the ship and coordinating the evacuation, got into a lifeboat and ordered dinner. And ultimately, what happened was this captain was given 16 years in jail for this whole episode. But only 5 of those were for the ship, for the mistake he made in hitting that rock. The other 11 years he got was for his irresponsibility after the ship had hit that rock. In other words, for not staying there and coordinating the abandonment of the ship. So when we have a problem, we need to be sure to calmly deal with it in the right way and at least minimize the problem. Do damage control in a good way. Number 39, submit the importance of your project to the overall ministry. So, for example, in YWAM in Bangalore, we would have different ministries, and sometimes there's a YWAM Bangalore event, and so we need to submit ourselves to that event and not just be thinking about our own ministry, but all of YWAM Bangalore. Philippians 2:4-5 says, don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Jesus Christ had. Okay, number 40, have a clean heart and life. Proverbs 16:12, it is an abomination to kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by righteousness. In other words, your whole ministry, the whole sphere in which you're leading, will be established by your clean heart. Or if you didn't have a clean heart, it would be corrupted by your unclean heart. So it's very important that you have a clean heart and life. Remember what David said? Psalm 51:10, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. And Keith Green, that famous musician, had a song about that. And 41, when you receive criticism, eat the meat and throw out the bones. So when you receive a bunch of criticism, chances are at least some of it has truth to it. So you need to evaluate all of it and learn from the parts that are truthful and accurate. And don't be bitter about the things that are not. Number 42, dwell on the good in people, not in the negative. So we want to be aware of the negative. It's good to not be blind, but at the same time, we mainly want to dwell on the good that is in people. In other words, if you're looking at people, are you digging for dirt or are you digging for gold? Let's dig for gold. Let's look for the good in people and bring that out. Number 43, find vision in people and feed it. I have found a number of good leaders do this. They look to see what vision people have around them, and they keep pumping into that and encouraging that, and that can become a ministry. So if you're a leader of 10 people and you find each of their visions, you could have 10 ministries coming up. Rather than there are some leaders who they themselves start different things and then they try and get other people to take it over. Those don't usually last as long as when a leader finds a vision within you and gets you doing it, because you're going to sustain that thing because you really believe in it. It's your thing. 44. Treat people as a 10. That means just appreciating people and seeing that everyone is really a treasure. You know, there's so many times when I hear of a friend who dies, or you go to a funeral and you hear about all the wonderful things about this person, and you think, oh, I wish I'd spent more time with that person. I really wish I would have appreciated that person more. And I just, what a privilege it was to spend time with that person as much as I did. You know, it's at the funeral or when someone dies that it fully impacts us how wonderful that person was. Well, let's try and do that while people are still alive and really treat each other as 10s, which we are. We are all treasures. Number 45, be intentional. In other words, whatever you hope to see happen, work on making that happen. You know, we want to reach this city for God. Well, how are you going to do that? You don't just kind of sit around and hope that one day it'll happen. You have to come up with strategies and ideas and go forward with that. Number 46, lead with humility. In other words, realize humility is basically just seeing yourself for what you really are. So you don't want to lead as if you are the all-encompassing person who knows everything, because you don't. We all are just good at certain things. So we want to lead with humility and pull out the treasures in other people to make things happen. Philippians 2:3 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, right? That's what Barnabas did. He valued Paul and all of Paul's potential, and he brought that out. 1 Kings 12:1-16 tells the story of when Israel rebelled against Rehoboam. Now, Rehoboam's mistake, and this is just when he became king, was he was not trying to lead with any humility. He was leading in complete pride, and people were turned off by that. And see, anyone who follows you, who's in your team, will be turned off if you try to lead in pride. But if you lead in humility and you affirm them, then they are going to really respect you and like you as a leader. So this is when Rehoboam had just become king of Israel after his father Solomon had died. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon, he returned from Egypt. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Rehoboam answered, "Go away for 3 days, and then come back to me." So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and who were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam, as the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." The king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given to him by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I'll scourge you with scorpions." So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of events was from the Lord to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. Then all of Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them. They answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." And so the Israelites went home. So you see, because he tried to lead them in complete pride, they said, "Forget you, we're leaving." But people respect a leader who leads in humility. Number 47, be a servant leader. Jesus said, "Here I am among you as one who serves," Luke 22:27. So Jesus is the example of leadership we should follow. Be a servant leader. Jesus said, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Mark 9:35. 48. Be ready to do some gentle cattle prodding. Now, when I first led an outreach team, for example, I would say, "Okay, we'll have our team meeting at 4 o'clock. And I would go to the room and just wait. And then people would slowly come in late, and I would get, upset that people were not there in time. And, it just was not a good situation. What I discovered is good leaders, when they're leading, they do a little reminding and prodding. In a DTS situation, usually when we're going to have a meeting, I might run around and knock on everyone's door and kind of shout, "Okay, we're meeting now." People need to be reminded. People need to be prodded, especially when you have a larger group of people. So be ready to do some gentle, loving cattle prodding. All right, on to number 49. It is better to over-communicate. Sometimes we announce something once and we just say, "Okay, well, they know. I don't need to announce this again." But people forget. People are distracted. People have all sorts of different things in their mind. So it's better to remind people, over-communicate, try different ways of communication, whether it's posting notices or sending out WhatsApp messages or email messages or announcing to the group. But you can't go wrong when you communicate too much. But when you communicate too little, then things get confused. Number 50, over-prepare. Whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a teaching that you're doing, whether it's an activity you're leading, it's better to over-prepare and have too much than too little. In my case, for example, if I'm going to give a sermon or a talk, I'll prepare a certain amount. Often it's a bit too much. So I'll see I have 10 minutes left and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can skip that thing. I can skip that thing, but it's better I have too much than too little. Or if I'm leading, say, a game night, I'll plan a number of games, usually more games that are likely to be necessary, so that I won't run out of games, but rather I might have a game or two left over I can use later on. Proverbs 24:27, prepare your work outside, get everything ready for yourself in the field. After that, build your house. So get things ready ahead of time. 51, experiment. Good leaders are always trying different things and different possibilities. Some things work, some don't, but you're not going to know unless you experiment with different ways of doing things and different modes of outreach and different ministry activities. So be creative, listen to God, and experiment. Don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid not to try. Number 52, be engaged and involved. So be a part of things. That's good leadership. Just physically being around, is the first step. A problem we have in some YWAM bases is that you have a big ministry training center or something, and many of the leaders who have spouses or families, they will live off the base and, not there. They're not physically there. And so the spiritual atmosphere suffers. If you're, as much as possible, be there and be a part of things. And then your influence will naturally be flowing from you. Number 53, be a recruiter. If you're going to be a leader, you need a team, you need staff, and so you always need to be recruiting because, especially if you're in a group like YWAM, people are often going and coming and going, and you have to be recruiting constantly because there's always an attrition rate. So always be looking for potential staff and potential leaders and potential people to do different things. And be inviting people. People like to be invited. So be inviting to people. When I was in Honolulu, Hawaii base, I staffed a number of DTSs, and the DTS director was a guy named Lon. And one time, after I'd led an outreach team to India, I came back to Honolulu, and Lon met me at the airport, and we drove to some store and got some refreshments, and immediately he asked me, can you staff the next school? He was there ready to recruit. And I was glad to be invited, and I did staff the next school. So people like to be asked, and sometimes the idea needs to be planted there for a while. So what I may do is, even as a person, as a student, I'll mention, you be good staff, you be good at doing this. And I keep planting that seed, hoping that thought will rumble through their soul and they'll decide to join us. Number 54, be inspiring. You have to inspire people. You have to get them excited. You have to get them interested, and you may have to plan this. In fact, you will have to plan this at times, of things you can do, things you can say to inspire people and make things exciting and interesting. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. That was said by John Quincy Adams, one of the early U.S. presidents. 55, be open to think outside the box. Don't just automatically do things the same way again and again. Think of new ideas, even ideas no one has ever done before. Don't be afraid to break free. Number 56, say no to the good and yes to the best. So you may be thinking your calling is to climb that little hill there, but you're actually meant to climb those mountains behind. So be careful not to be distracted by things that are not the best. We really have to listen to God as to what the best is. Number 57, don't just avoid the black wrong areas, avoid the gray areas as well. So we, of course, know to avoid the things that are definitely sin, definitely wrong, but there's a lot of gray areas, right? Those areas are kind of like, well, it's not the best, but it's not necessarily wrong, but it's not. And the higher up you go in leadership, the more you really need to avoid those gray areas as well, because people are really watching you and you need to move to a higher level. 1 Corinthians 6:12 talks about this sort of thing. I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. So let's really move up to a higher constructive level. Number 58, remember the little things. Good leaders remember the little things, because those little things are actually big things to different people, like birthdays and anniversaries and welcomes and just appreciating people. Remember those little things, and they add up to a great amount of encouragement. 59, don't remain too comfortable. If your ministry and your life are just kind of doing the same thing and again, it's kind of easy, it's kind of predictable, that's not too good. You need to be taking on something new and exciting. There needs to be a new dynamic. You need to be growing. Because if you do remain too comfortable, probably God will do something to prod you or to make you uncomfortable so we can grow. So better to do it ourselves than wait for God to do it. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Proverbs 10:12. So we always should be actively working for new and exciting things that we can be involved in. Number 60, use what you have and do what you can. And sometimes you may be thinking, well, I don't have this gift, I don't have that gift, I can't do this, I can't do that. Don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what you can do. And all of us have gifts that we can put to work and really do constructive things. 61, give everyone a warm welcome. So when people arrive at your ministry center or your school or whatever it is you're leading, be sure and give them a warm welcome, because that really, they're very not at ease when they arrive typically. They're kind of wondering, what's this going to be like? Are these people going to like me? And as you give people a warm welcome, it does so much to put them at ease and give them good hope. So that can mean things like giving them a nice welcome basket, which we like to do in YWAM, sitting there and talking them for a while, giving them a refreshment, encouraging them, just being friendly. Or maybe you can even welcome them with a song.
Shake your hands and let them flow. With your thinking hat, you're ready to go. Welcome, welcome, high and mighty. Turn around and touch the sky. Welcome, welcome, high and mighty. With our learning wings we'll fly. With our learning wings we'll fly.
Number 62, give everyone a nice farewell. And that includes people who may leave under negative circumstances. You may have some people in a school you have to send home, or maybe a staff member, things kind of go sour at some point, something goes wrong and the person needs to go. But we need to deal with those things, of course, but as we send them out, let's try to send them out in a very loving way, because that's going to be the last impression they have of their whole experience in YWAM. And if they were sent out in a bad way, then they can lead with some junk in their heart and some bad vibes. But we want to give them a nice, loving farewell. Number 63, don't lead like a drill sergeant, lead like a concierge, right? You know, we have the drill sergeants who are drilling the troops, and the concierges are the ones who help people and guide people in fancy hotels. And so I have seen both. I have seen some people who are on staff of DTSs act a little bit like drill sergeants, like they're going to whip people into shape. We don't want to be like this.
I am Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, your senior drill instructor. From now on, you will speak only when spoken to, and the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be, sir. Do you maggots understand that?
Sir, yes, sir.
If you ladies leave my island, if you survive recruit training, you will be a weapon. You will be a minister of death praying for war. But until that day, you are pukes. You are the lowest form of life on earth. Because I am hard, you will not like me. But the more you hate me, the more you will learn. I am hard, but I am fair. Here you are all equally worthless. And my orders are to weed out all non-hackers who do not pack the gear to serve in my beloved corps. Do you maggots understand that?
Sir, yes, sir.
What's your name, scumbag?
Sir, Private Brown, sir.
From now on, you're Private Snowball. Do you like that name?
Sir, yes, sir.
Well, there's one thing that you won't like, Private Snowball. They don't serve fried chicken and watermelon on a daily basis in my mess hall.
Sir, yes, sir.
Sir, yes, sir. Private Joker, why did you join my beloved corps?
Sir, to kill, sir.
So you're a killer.
Sir, yes, sir.
Let me see your war face.
Sir.
You got a war face? Ah! That's a war face. Now let me see your war face.
Ah!
You didn't convince me. Let me see your real war face.
Ah!
You don't scare me. Work on it.
Sir, yes, sir.
What's your excuse?
Sir, excuse for what, sir?
I'm asking them questions here, Private. Do you understand?
Sir, yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Can I be in charge for a while?
Sir, yes, sir.
Are you shook up? Are you nervous?
Sir, I am, sir.
Do I make you nervous?
Sir.
Sir, what? Private Pyle, why is your footlocker unlocked?
Sir, I don't know, sir.
Private Pyle, if there is one thing in this world that I hate, it is an unlocked footlocker. You know that, don't you?
Sir, yes, sir.
Get down! Well, now, let's just see if there's anything missing. What is that? What is that, Private Pyle?
Sir, jelly donut, sir.
A jelly donut?
Sir, yes, sir.
How did it get here?
Sir, I took it from the mess hall, sir.
Is chow allowed in the barracks, Private Pyle?
Sir, no, sir.
Are you allowed to eat jelly donuts, Private Pyle?
Sir, no, sir.
And why not, Private Pyle?
Sir, because I'm too heavy, sir.
Because you are a disgusting fat body, Private Pyle.
Sir, yes, sir.
Then why did you hide a jelly donut in your footlocker, Private Pyle?
Sir, because I was hungry, sir.
Because you were hungry. Private Pyle has dishonored himself and dishonored the platoon. I have tried to help him, but I have failed. I have failed because you have not helped me. You people have not given Private Pyle the proper motivation. I will not punish him. I will punish all of you. And the way I see it, ladies, you owe me for one jelly donut. Now get on your faces. Open your mouth. They're paying for it. You eat it. Ready? Exercise.
1, 2, 3, 4. I love Marine Corps. 1, 2, 3, 4. I love Marine Corps. 1, 2, 3, 4. I love Marine Corps.
We should lead more like the style of concierges. You know, a concierge is someone at a real fancy hotel, and their job is to make sure the guest has a good experience. And so really they are a guide. They can help you find anything you need. They can help you find your way around the city or get what you're needing to figure out. And that's what we do in YWAM schools. We want students to have a good experience and guide them through that, or staff to be guided into their ministries. So be more of a concierge. Here's an example of a concierge.
You know, when I started working as a concierge, the only communication tools we really had were the telephone and the telex, and that was how you got your telegram with up-to-the-minute news. I'm Tom Wolfe, Chief Concierge at the Fairmont Hotel. I started here in 1974 and introduced the concept of the concierge not only to the Fairmont but to America. Good morning to you, sir. Can I help you? Your concierge is the person who is your boots on the ground in that city, who has the personal touch and has the personal contacts, so that when on the internet it says everything is full, maybe it isn't. You know, San Francisco is known for its many hangouts, its many interesting historical places, none more historical than our own John's Grill. Been around just as long as the Fairmont Hotel has, and it's one of my favorites to duck into. Humphrey Bogart was in the film The Maltese Falcon, written by Dashiell Hammett right here in this lovely, lovely place. This was his favorite hangout, and his protagonist, Sam Spade, actually came here to dine in his book. There you have it, the actual Maltese Falcon, ladies and gentlemen. One of my favorite places to come here. It's kind of like a shrine, but duly so, because the Maltese Falcon is a wonderful piece of literature. San Francisco has so many steps, so many stairways, and the Vallejo ones are wonderful because they go all the way up from the top of Russian Hill, down through Nob Hill, through Chinatown, and you can eventually get to North Beach from there. But we now have Little Russia over out on Geary Street, where if you walk into a deli there, they will greet you in Russian. And that's always interesting. My Russian is not that great, but I can manage a Zdravstvuyte, как вы поживаете. We have Little Italy too. The North Beach restaurant, the proprietor said to me, before you send anybody here, I want you to come over and have dinner here. And I was knocked out. It was real old school Italian with veal, and they did the zabaglione for dessert, which is still to this day one of my favorites. If you get on the Hyde Street cable car and you ride it to the end of the line, you cannot avoid the Buena Vista Cafe. The thing that made it really world famous was the fact that way back in the 1950s, Stan Delaplane, who was a local writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, had gone to Shannon Airport in Ireland and had ordered an Irish coffee. And he loved it so much, he said that his friend who ran the Buena Vista should be serving it. This is the key, the cream. Now, in the UK, we have wonderful clotted cream, readily available. Over here, not so much. So they spent a year working on different formulae, and they finally got it right, and still serve 2,000 to 3,000 glasses a day. So cheers, and thank you, Stan Delaplane. I'm Tom Wolfe, and I'm San Francisco.
Remember how Jesus said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." So think about it. If you were going to do another school in YWAM, and you could either have staff of that school lead you like they were a drill sergeant, or lead you like they were concierge, Which would you prefer? So do the same for others as you would have someone do unto you. Number 64 is have a strong foundation. And see, the foundation in your life is your level of intimacy with God. It's the level of discipline you have. It's the good habits that you have formed in your life. It's your character. It's your foundation. And we look at Matthew 7:24-27. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the stream rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a mighty crash. So you need to have a good foundation of obedience and good character and intimacy with God and knowing the Word of God. In Israel, they had a lot of rocky desert, and then they had these rivers that would flow through the land, and where the riverbeds were, it was very sandy. So if you built your house on the sand, on that flat area that looked very nice and easy to work with, it could rain, and then the river would come and knock over your house. So you were building in a bad foundation. So if you have a good foundation of inner self-discipline, of good character, obedience, that's going to be the foundation for your whole ministry. And ultimately, your ministry will fall or rise to the level of your foundation. I have seen some people with poor foundations who got all excited about ministry, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to start this thing, and they jump into it with all enthusiasm. And after a while, it collapses because their character cannot sustain it. On the other hand, I've seen people who had very good foundations. In fact, the foundation was so good that it lifted up their ministry and they were promoted. I've experienced both of those things myself. So it's better that we have strong foundations. Number 65, as you give out responsibility, give out power and authority also. Luke 9, 1-2, and he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over demons and to cure diseases, and he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. So Jesus gave authority. We need to do the same thing. If you give someone responsibility, give them the power also to work with that. For example, I had one DTS, I was a DTS director. I had one DTS leader who I did not always agree with her, but I let her do things the way she wanted to do them because she was leading. And I wasn't going to just cut in and say, look, you need to do it this way, because I felt that with responsibility comes authority and power. Okay? Number 66. Seek good advice. This can always help you in leadership. Proverbs 15:22, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. And I have found that whenever I've sought advice, usually it ends up being useful, and usually I'm glad when I've abided by it. One person who did not do this was Absalom. You may remember in 2 Samuel 17, Absalom asked the advice of Ahithophel. And Ahithophel had good advice on how he could defeat King David. But fortunately, Absalom did not follow that advice and so did not defeat David. Or also Rehoboam, he foolishly did not take the advice of his father's elders to be more of a servant to the people. And because he didn't follow that good advice, the people rebelled against him. Moses, on the other hand, was wise enough to take the good advice of Jethro, who advised him how to appoint different judges over the land and spread out the work of leadership, and things ran much better. So Moses was wise to follow good advice. 67. Be honest and seek the truth. Proverbs 16:13. Kings take pleasure in honest lips. They value the one who speaks what is right. So if you're in leadership, don't be hiding things and keeping things in darkness and not worrying about things that could genuinely be wrong, but rather try to bring everything to light. And if something needs to be changed, you can do that. 68. Give out life in your leadership by controlling your anger and being more encouraging. Proverbs 16:14-15, a king's wrath is a messenger of death, but the wise will appease it. When a king's face brightens, it means his favor is like a rain cloud in spring. So this is how we should be. We should follow the good example of Lauren and Darlene. I have never heard a story about Lauren Cunningham really getting angry. I mean, they've had these different big global leadership meetings in the past, and I've known people who've been in those meetings, and often I'll ask them after one of those meetings, what really happened? Okay, we got the official report, but what really happened in this meeting? And I have heard some funny stories, but I have never heard any story of Lauren getting angry. In fact, I would say the worst story I've heard of Lauren, if you want to even call it that, was some friends of mine, leaders in YWAM in Hawaii, had this dog named Gracie. And this dog was pretty big and quite hyper. And it was quite irritating, too, because it would run around their apartment and put its paws on you and jump on you and then jump off. And, everybody found this dog irritating. And someone even had a joke because a number of international YWAMers had visited this home that this dog was hated around the world. And one time Lauren Cunningham was at that apartment, and at one point he was watching TV or relaxing or something, and he said, this dog is licking my leg and I don't like it. And so, but if that's the worst story we can hear of Lauren Cunningham, of him being irritated at a dog this dog irritated all of us, I think he's doing pretty well. And I spent a half a day with Lauren Cunningham, and he was delightful and just as friendly and funny as he is when he speaks to crowds. Darlene is even more encouraging, and she's constantly giving out very encouraging words. One time I was collecting YWAM outreach stories, and she emailed back to me, what a wonderful, worthy project. So they both are very encouraging people. They don't vent anger and things like that. Good examples to follow. So let's be disciplined. And you may find sometimes when you're in leadership and you are angry about something, okay, you have to control your anger. Sometimes you have to just keep it completely to yourself because you want to be a good example. One person not a good example was King Saul. He would vent his anger. He would explode in anger and even tried to kill people in his anger. King David was a good example. He learned to control his anger, like when in 2 Samuel 16, when David was having to leave the palace and go into hiding, and Shimei was throwing dirt at David and cursing him and yelling at him. And David's men even said, should we go kill this guy? But David said, no. Let God will recompense us for the humiliation he's giving to us, basically. And so David restrained himself, and that's good leadership. 69. Differentiate between immature people and those of genuine bad character. Okay? Now, an immature person is someone who just is new and doesn't know better, doing stupid things or things that are wrong, but yet it's more like they just haven't learned what the right thing to do is, and so they're immature. Now, a person of bad character is someone who's pretty much stubbornly in a bad way. And you can rebuke them and they just keep doing these bad things. You know that in 10, 20 years, they're probably going to still be doing these things like you're seeing them do. So there's a difference between that. Proverbs 20:26. A wise king winnows out the wicked. He drives a threshing wheel over them. Okay? So we need to find who these people of bad character are. They're not usually a great number of them in a typical YWAM situation, but they can be here and there. How do we differentiate between a person who is immature and growing and a person who's of bad character? Well, one way is this, Titus 3:10-11. Warn a divisive person once, then warn them a second time. After that, have nothing to do with them. You may be sure that such people are warped and sinful. They are self-condemned. So if someone is persisting in being divisive and critical and just doing these wrong things and they're not changing, then they can be a person of bad character. Okay? So there's many people who have immature character. And I mean, I was, maybe still am, I don't know. But there's plenty of people who are immature, who have areas of immaturity, but they're growing. And so we can work with them. But then there's other people, like I said, who are a bad character and they're just stuck that way and they don't have that interest in growing and they don't have that interest in getting close to God and they don't show repentance in their hearts. So what do you do with people who have bad character? Well, in my experience, they tend to explode on their own. They just kind of implode and go away on their own often. We had a couple people like that staffing a DTS I led, and they both were, doing a little bit of drugs and into all sorts of bad attitudes. And ultimately, both of them imploded and went away on their own. So, but we just have to be aware of these things. At the same time, we don't want to take immature people and think they have bad character. There's some people who just are stumbling around doing some wrong things, but with some correction, with some encouragement, with some discipleship, they can grow to be amazing people with very effective ministries. Number 70, submit to God so he can best use you. Proverbs 21:1, in the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels towards all who please him. You may notice the kings of Israel who submitted to God had success. Have you noticed that? The ones that got rid of the idols and repented and got everyone worshiping God, they had victory in battle, they had success. And the ones who were dark and worshiping idols, and even if they tried to get ready for battle, they often lost and the kingdom did badly. So the most important thing is really to have a good heart towards God, submitted to him. And when you do that, you'll find that other things are clicking more into place. 71, protect your heart. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Proverbs 4:32. What that means is you will probably be hurt in leadership. There will be people who don't believe in you. There will be people who oppose you. There will be people who make trouble for you. And you want to make sure you don't let those things get into your heart and cause you to be angry or bitter or depressed or whatever. We have to protect our hearts. So be careful with all these things. And know that the important thing is not what people think about you, but what God thinks about you. So I hope you enjoyed those 71 suggestions for leadership. And as we all apply those sort of things more and more in our lives, we can grow. And also look to other resources for learning about leadership, like John Maxwell books and videos and other people who teach on that topic. And really, though, the way you're going to grow the most in leadership is just by doing it and learning as you do. So go for it. Thank you all for joining me. Bye-bye.